Hello, dear viewers of Consent Dojo. This is episode number 41. Oh my goodness, it is March 12th of the year 2025. Wow, what a year.
Mhm.
Anyhow, today we are back this month with a very timely topic. We're going to be talking about BDSM, alternative lifestyle, and the law. And we have a very special guest, MxBliss. And um, I want to put this out immediately that we're going to have a conversation. We only have a limited time. We will not cover everything, but do not be sad because Mixed Bliss has tons of resources, which we'll be putting into the chat. And for those of you who are watching this later for Consent Dojo YouTube channel, it'll be down in there. Some of it actually will live in the resources will live in my Patreon. Why? Because some of these resources will get me snagged by YouTube. So there will be some resources that I will have it in my Patreon, but this recording and all the resources will live in my Patreon for the public. I have found that certain links get my videos nicked. So I didn't consent to that. But apparently I did consent to the terms of use. So there'll be plenty of resources. We will cover as much as we can and give some time to Q&A. I can also guarantee we won't be covering everything in the Q&A, but good news, we are going to be starting with your generosity. Thank you, Bliss. Ask a kinky lawyer Q&A section in my Patreon.
Yep.
Yep. So that somebody said YouTube hates Midori. No, they're just judgy. It could be much worse, but they're kind of judgy. Mm.
Community standards.
I know. God, what a pain in the ass. So this wonderful human being, let me tell you about Mixed Bliss. And Mixed Bliss, JD, MBA, overachiever much. Hello, fellow Asian. Thank you. You've got over 25 years of experience as an attorney, and through her legal career, she's practiced estate planning and business advising to companies big and small. She's also served as general counsel and safety officer to one of the biggest brands in adult entertainment. Hmm. Bliss is now helping creators, fellow sex workers, and producers of content protect their business and privacy as president of Collab Campfire. It's all
Yep.
one word.
Startup. Yep.
Campfire.
Mhm.
As the owner of Legally Bound Group, haha, good name, she's helping families with estate planning needs and representing kink and sex-friendly business. She's an attorney, dominance executive coach, and bondage performance artist, BDSM educator. They present on a wide range of topics, but especially loves talking about rope bondage, the law, sharing info, so we can live our best lives. And on FetLife, look for MxBliss, MxBliss. On Instagram, MX_Bliss. On the web, boundbliss.com or legallyboundgroup.com and collabcampfire.com. So,
Lots of .coms. Yep.
so thank you for being here for this conversation.
I am so honored to be sharing space with you, Midori. I mentioned this to you. I would not be here today. I probably would not be in public kink, honestly, if it weren't for you. My first kink book was Wild Side Sex. I went into like a little local store shebop here, and there's a book on the shelf with this beautiful woman on it who looked vaguely like me, and I was like, "That's the book I want." Yeah. And then a year or so later, I found myself at a Forte Femme, and like really, really appreciate all that you've done to bring joy and talk about consent. So I'm getting a little teary, but like, yeah. And also, when you come locally, I'm in the Portland metropolitan area. When you come locally to our con, people mistake me for you, which I'm always super pleased with. So like Midori, I'm like, no, but thank you.
Making me all mushy.
Yeah.
Yay. So, yeah, Portland. I'm gonna be, hey folks, if you're gonna be at Kink Fest, y'all, I'm gonna be there, and I think, are you gonna be there too?
Yeah, I'll be teaching a BDSM in the law class, and then I will be running the stage. We have lots of great performances, so excited about that.
Excellent. Kink Fest, such a great event. So I am looking forward to seeing you, and I am looking forward to seeing any of you all who's going to Kink Fest. So, ready to dive into questions
Do
that
it.
I have for you?
Yeah, let's
Okay.
do it.
I thought I'd ask a tiny question. Tiny, simple, very short answer, I'm sure.
Mm.
Overview of legality of kink.
Yeah. So I like to say that BDSM in the US is not illegal. It is also not legal, which is to say that it operates kind of in this very gray area. State laws vary a great deal. But I think the thing you need to know and take away is that in most jurisdictions, you cannot consent to the underlying activities that we might do in kink, right? So you can't consent legally to assault or battery. You can't consent to being tied up and being bonded, right? Like that is against the laws in most states. You can't consent to have somebody's hand on your neck and all sorts of things that we might do as part of role play and play generally can be construed as illegal. And so that is a tricky area. We don't have any First Amendment rights to free speech around kink, right? I think generally it has been interpreted as obscene, and so there's many ways in which we operate in this very gray area of the law. I have not seen a ton of prosecutions related to kink related play. You see it come up from time to time when somebody has been hurt or harmed. You might see it in a case of sexual assault or domestic violence. Those are the areas in which it comes up the most frequently. And almost always, consensual kink is used as a defense to a crime, and that defense may or may not be useful, except for in the context of a jury nullification. Some states like California and interestingly Texas have some consent, like you can consent to certain kinds of play. I think of this as sort of like bedroom kind of spanking kind of play. The standard is pretty low in terms of the kinds of things that many of us do in kink. But there's also case law in California that talks about um, that if you um, consent to certain kinds of bodily injury, uh, then you must not have mental capacity to actually give consent. And that case is as recent as 2006. And again, we'll be sharing a handout uh, that will give you some more details about all of these things in a personal risk assessment. But yeah, I mean, like it is a risky area. Uh, a lot of the areas in which I navigate the world are very much in the gray area of the law. I teach kink classes. Uh, I might receive, airfare to go and teach at a con. Like in some jurisdictions, that could be, translated if one is aggressive in interpreting the law as prostitution, right? So there's many areas of the law where we operate right on the edge, and so that is one of the reasons why what's happening currently in our political environment is so disturbing for me as a sex worker, as a lawyer, as an immigrant, as yeah, it's as somebody who is a trans ally, that is a very scary time, to be quite honest. And so we're seeing different interpretations of the law, like just in the Portland community, the Portland, Oregon community, we're seeing a lot more enforcement of laws that have always been on the books, but that have not been enforced. I just saw a report on sex work prosecutions, and those are on the rise with the last prosecutor. We're just seeing more of these, more of our liberties and more of our rights to sort of be in our life and be in our freedom taken away. And so it's an interesting time. The good news is there's a lot of people who care and who are trying to do something about it. But it is definitely a time where I am emotionally challenged. Yeah. Sorry. I don't want
Yeah,
to do this screaming,
yeah,
screaming
yeah,
face. Yeah. Sorry,
yeah.
I know, like I feel like it's a little bit of a switch and bait because I was like, we're going to talk about hope, and we will. That's where we'll talk about.
Well, well, hope is, well, hope is a flower that comes up in a field of fire, not that which is in a uninformed, blind, everything will be fine. Now, it's hope is different than that like dog where it's like everything is fine and the world is on fire. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it's I talk about this in my class, but when we operate in what we think about both as in alt lifestyles generally, right? And alt lifestyles generally, we operate around the fringes, and your local law varies quite a bit. And we have some really interesting laws in Portland, for example, around like Oregon Constitution, freedom of speech that actually allow us to operate kink-friendly businesses anywhere except for within a narrow parameter, like around schools, right?
Mhm.
And in most cities, the opposite is true. You have very tiny areas generally where you can operate kink-friendly businesses or sex-friendly businesses. And
This is why Portland has amazing strip joints.
Yes, I think we have the highest per capita strip joints and coffee shops, which totally.
Yeah, there is. Okay, so when I'm up there, I'm going to be rounding up some people to see if we can go to that one favorite strip joint of mine. So yeah, this explains why there's awesome strip joints in Portland. Oh my God.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have the best vegan one too.
Ah,
But we also have, sex clubs that are around town, and we have and like in performing kink and doing kink in public, even though I may be doing things that are uh that will look to an outside observer as quite violent and maybe violating all of those laws around assault and battery. We have some First Amendment-ish, like it's the Oregon Constitution rights to perform and to create art and protest. And again, that is a statement about Portland. All cities and all states vary in that regard.
so, all right. So since this is Consent Dojo,
Mhm.
specifically around kink, BDSM, and consent,
Yes.
I'd like to hear a little about that.
Yeah. I think the standards that we use in community around consent are fantastic. And when I say standards, I mean sort of the best standards, I think, or the best practice standards. I think many of us use kind of the Fry's model, which is, freely given, revocable, enthusiastic, informed, and specific, right? Like that's the Fry model. And you see that mirrored in some model legislation. Now, that is our best community practice. It matters in so much as if you're ever trying to use it as a defense, an expert witness might be able to come in and say, oh, yes, they performed this kink within the community standards of best practice. It is There is not a single state law, though, that mirrors our community standard around the Fry's model of consent. The NCSF, which is the National Coalition of Sexual Freedom, has, along with the American Law Institute, put together like a piece of model legislation that would actually mirror those best standards, but it has not been adopted in any state yet. And I don't have a ton of optimism that that will happen in the next couple of years, but it is out there. And if you see opportunities to engage in that debate, um, please engage in that debate and find ways to support that legislation. It would move the needle a great deal for us to be able to operate with legitimacy and um, at least that clear defense is articulated in the law.
When you say engage in discourse on this, what do you mean by
Mhm. So there's a couple of things. Um, I wrote the brief for Oregon. At the state legislative level, NCSF has a number of briefs that talk about what the consent laws look like in each of the states.
that?
Not all the states. I think there's like the last time I looked, there was like maybe 20 done. But many of the states have these consent briefs where you get a snapshot of what the law looks like and what the law could look like if they pass the model legislation. Um, in your local communities, if in particular, if you are working with like a domestic violence organization or an organization that uh, is concerned about sexual freedom, like there are opportunities to bring this legislation and to see if it will pass. Again, I don't have a ton of optimism that that will be in the next couple of years, but that debate is happening, and I hope to see it pass at least in one state soon, maybe Oregon. But
Yeah.
we have a lot of uh, not Portland parts of Oregon too. So
Yes, that there's definitely different leanings in Oregon. Yep.
yeah, and we talked about community standards in the topic in the context of terms of use, but that community standard principle applies in all sorts of ways, which is to say that um, if you have the luxury in your life, which I do, and many of us do not because we have kids or because we are in education or for whatever reason, but to advocate and to be um, as as open is as reasonable under what I think are consent expectations to talk about the healthy kink. I think that that is fantastic, right? Like I obviously don't talk about kink in areas where there are minors. I don't kink in front of people who don't have the agency to consent. But where there's opportunities for advocacy, I most certainly want to take advantage of all of those and talk about the right to exist, frankly.
So you were talking about the legislation possible changes as per NCSF.
Mhm.
Most of us are not in a situation where impacting local laws. Maybe. Or do we?
You absolutely do. You absolutely do in the sense that if you have local organizations that are putting on kink education, for example, finding ways to support them, and that might look like just showing up to some of those events. It may look like finding ways to support your local dungeon. Uh, and that support may look a number of different ways. Most kink venues or dungeons or play spaces that I see that have problems with the law, generally it happens in the context of land use of all things, right? It's a zoning issue. Most dungeons are shut down because of one of two reasons, because of neighborhood complaints or zoning, and sometimes they're closely related. So if you operate in a non, you know, adult industry friendly area, you can get shut down very quickly. Many of us have the ability to engage in local state boards or local land use boards. I sit, like I sit on my neighborhood association, and my neighborhood association is very active in land use choices. Like all of these areas are in ways in which we can show up. Uh, and it is a broader statement about like how we affect the community standard, right? This notion of community standard. If you're in a space where you are safe to do so and have an opportunity to speak out, if you see somebody else speaking about sexual freedom, to be able to support them in that speech, it's those are ways in which we can make a difference and move the needle.
And that does happen in big and small ways.
It does.
Yeah, and this is where genuine allyship, and even at like family dinner tables.
Family dinner tables, it means if you see somebody doing something that you may not, for whatever reason, be able to do, but you admire, just telling them thank you so that they have the strength to keep fighting. Um, Through this period of time, you had posted one of my favorite quotes by Dan Savage. I saw that on your Instagram feed, and um, the quote, paraphrasing, is something like, during the AIDS crisis, we thought we were losing. We thought we were in this losing, hopeless battle. And we were losing our compatriots day in and day out. But every night we would dance. And the reason why we danced is because it would give us the strength to fight, right? And it is the fight that it is, we fight to dance. We fight for the joy, and that's the energy that gets us out there every day. I mean, paraphrasing, probably I just, um, which is to say that as you are exercising your joy, that is one of the best ways that you can show up for this fight, is to enable and support and create that joy, right? And when you're able to do that, we all are energized because we know what we're fighting for, and we're fighting for each other, right? So
Yeah, it's such a good quote to remind us. And many people, well, weren't around for those bad old days, and we've got a new set of bad old days now. Um, oh yeah, there's a question that I'm going to toss your way. This is interesting. Regarding the 2006 case
yeah,
about unable to consent to receiving injuries, I believe that's Paddleboro.
it is California v.
Oh,
Samuel.
oh, that one. Okay.
Yeah, Samuels.
Could the ruling of this case apply to football?
That's a great question. And you, my friend, are in America, where football is like apple pie.
Religion, right? Yeah.
So in most states, there are actually laws around sports and certain kinds of activities where you can actually consent to injury. Now, you can't consent to a grievous injury. So California in particular has like laws that say you can consent to, um, you know, potentially having a permanent head injury by getting hit a bunch of times in the course of playing sports or rugby or football. You cannot, yeah, there are specific carve outs to that law that say those sorts of things are okay. And you can consent again, but using football, you can't use football as a ruse to like intentionally injure somebody, but within the confines of that sport itself, you can consent. That's why I can go rock climbing, which is ridiculously dangerous, right? Yeah, and it's all part of like what we protect and what we don't. If I were to have an explicit conversation about sex, for example, and it were in the context of procreation or family making, well, that's protected speech, right? If I were to talk about sex in the context of, say, joy and pleasure and uh, doing the things that I like to do, like that is not protected speech because that is probably obscene. Right. So like where the lines are, and that's all about community standards. And we are community. So as we go out and as we make more joy and as we change the conversation about community standards, that's how we elevate. That's what the dance looks like. That's what the fight looks like, right? It's like living our best lives to the extent that we can and that we feel is within our risk profile. Because I understand depending on where you're at, it is go and where your what your individual circumstances are, like going to a kink club may not be within a reasonable risk profile.
Shifting community standards. Okay, so for women identifying folks, this may seem a no-brainer, but if you wear trousers, at one point, not too long ago, that was counter to community standards. If your garment was too short or revealing, counter to community standards. Carry a condom in your purse.
That would make you a big old slut.
And arrestable.
Yes.
So, uh, folks, I'm not kidding about that last one. Yeah. Um, so we're diving into the area of the current political environment. What about things to look out for? I'm an immigrant. I'm POC. I'm female. I'm out kinkster. My business talks about joy-centered sex and kink. Then my friends are trans. I've got, well, depending on one's definition of sex worker, I'm a sex worker because I make money off of writing smut as well as teaching about sexuality and a whole wide range of that, which is sex work. Um, what are things to look out for?
Trojan horses. Let me start by saying Trojan horses. Um, as a sex worker myself, I think of what is the area in which Project 2025, and for those of you who are unfamiliar, Project 2025 is basically an agenda for sort of rewriting American culture, if you will, in many ways, and using the law and government to rewrite that culture. And a big component, or at least a component that I'm really focused on, is what they want to do to shut down sex work, porn, sexual content, the stuff, Midori, that you do, the stuff that I do, the stuff that brings me joy, right? And so, um, and what they are using, what the state legislators and the federal legislation has used successfully in the past and is using quite diligently now, is age verification laws. They were using anti-trafficking laws to basically shut down a lot of online sex work. The law was called FOSTA SESTA, which basically made it so that it became much harder for anybody to do payment processing online if they had any sort of like adult content, that sort of thing. Um, they are using age verification laws essentially to shut down porn. And, maybe you're not a big fan or supporter of porn, and I respect that. I would say that porn is a bit of a canary in the coal mine as to the ability for us to express and engage in sexual speech in this country. So there are many states that have basically said, unless you invade somebody's privacy a great deal and you get their photo and their legal name and you like validate that in a very particular way, in order to validate their age, right? Uh, you cannot like as a company who produces or distributes porn, you will be charged with criminal charges if a minor accesses that porn. Right. So it's like those sorts of laws are being rolled out in states across the country. I think there are several states right now. I don't have the most immediate list, but I think North Carolina is one of them. I could be wrong, so please don't quote me on that. Where the porn companies just don't distribute porn. I think if you're in some states in this country, you can't access porn. I think Texas is also one of them. So, uh, it's a Trojan horse to shut down any alt sex, right? And so if you are, say, for example, operating a small kink-friendly business, maybe you have a local dungeon, think twice about age verification, right? Like you may not be checking IDs at the door. If I were running a kink-friendly physical business or online business for that matter, I would think about ways in which to buttress what I'm doing around ID verification. Um, it's going to be the Trojan horse.
And what does buttressing in this case mean for that theoretical small business?
Yeah. I would most certainly make sure that an ID is looked at. Um, I have some concerns about privacy on the other side of
Mhm.
that I'll talk about. But I would most certainly want to confirm that the person who's on that ID that says that they're over 18 or 21 is actually that person on the ID. I'd take a much longer pause at that. I think in unless there was alcohol served, I think that there was at least a common practice was it was a lot more like, we just want to make sure you're an adult. And it was a much more friendly conversation. Even if I'm hosting a house party right now, unless I knew all of the people quite well, I would probably want some sort of age verification.
Mhm.
And there are apps that do that. There's all kinds of tools that you can use to do that. Um, but I'm certainly looking at my practices around how I age verify before people come to my classes and making sure that whoever is hosting me has something in place. And you do, like when you get on the Zoom call, there's like when you register, you have to verify your particular age. And also, like this is a format where there won't be sexually explicit content. There will be, there may be conversations about sex and sexual liberation and all of that, but we're not doing any demos today.
Right. Yeah. Huh. Yeah. It's now we were focusing on businesses, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But what about for folks that are like, well, I don't run a business.
Yeah. I guess just having a little bit more understanding as those businesses that you might support are trying to figure things out and figure out how to stay open, right? During this difficult time, just keeping an eye on that and having a little more patience for folks as we're trying to work through this. Um, that is certainly one area, but also, one of the challenges before I left my corporate practice, I had to keep a very split identity.
Hmm.
And I think our privacy is going to be challenged, right? Right. I think our rights to privacy and uh, through, frankly, this age verification Trojan horse. So just be thinking about that as well. I mean, I don't have answers. I have a lot of questions, unfortunately, because there isn't any clear answers. But being engaged in the conversation, supporting your local educators and conferences and uh, BDM spaces. I think all of those are and sex positive spaces. I think are important parts of the conversation that we can all do.
Okay. And for individuals, all right.
Mhm.
So kink, let's face it, for longest time has had the, and I think there's truth to it. It's a very white space.
Mhm.
It's you've got the gay leather enclave, but it is a space of privilege and heteronormativity.
Yes, absolutely.
And for a long time, for various reasons, those of us who are not that, and also from family or cultural pressures, not been coming into kink and alt sex environments. Now we have been, and now we're in an environment again where we've got layers of things to worry about. So people who are immigrants or people who might get tagged as immigrants or trans bodies, individuals, trans folks, and uh, various overlap of all of those circles. I don't know if this is a legal question or just me talking about my feelings of how do we feel safe and free, or how can we work towards being feeling safe and free when going to going to a party or a gathering or a con in itself may be putting us at risk for all sorts of things.
Just like any conversation about kink that I would have, I would talk about risk and
Mm.
risk mitigation and risk management. By virtue of certain privileges that I have, you know, I am I am cis, generally a cis person. Uh, have access to education. I have naturalized citizenship, right? I'm an immigrant, but my parents took the test, and so I have these privileges. I don't have children or parents that I'm worried about being outed to. Or I don't have a career that I need to worry about managing because of my kink. So I have this privilege that that demands of me that I be an ally to those who don't have the same privileges that I do. And for those of you who we all have relative privilege, and for us to be able to stand up for and fight for, and that fight can be very subtle. And I'm not asking you to take up arms. I'm asking you maybe to show up at a crafting event for queer people and bring some supplies. I'm asking you to um, call a friend that looks like they're struggling. I mean, these are the ways in which we show up for each other. Because again, about figuring out ways within your risk managed world that you can dance so that we can show up for the fight.
I am wondering, there have been ICE raids happening in weird places. Do event owners and venue owners, should they have that little briefing of what to say? There's like these cards going around.
Yes, they absolutely should. And I will send you some. I didn't have them prepared, but I actually have them printed out and I will send you some.
Yeah, and for for venue owners and whoever that may be at the door of these places.
Yes.
So,
In fact, you've given me a great best practice. I just had them printed out and I have them sort of sitting on my side. I'm going to start taking them to all the venue owners. So thank you.
yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
and for folks who are not familiar with this, can you give a little bit of what I'm talking about?
Yes. They basically tell you what rights you have as a space owner, private space owner, to basically tell them that they need a warrant and like to tell them to back off. If you are in a sanctuary city, which thankfully Portland is, you have a lot more protection, and your local police can actually help protect you. But it's about making sure that it's just giving you your rights and responsibilities. You know, like you get your Miranda rights written, like read to you when you are being arrested. It's just like a little card that says, if you are undocumented, here's what you should do if this happens to you. It's just those sorts of things. But yeah,
Because venue raiding is an old tactic.
it is. It
Yeah.
is. And if anybody hears of anything like that, I would love to know. But uh, I have not seen in particular like sex clubs or kink clubs be like the subject of those particular kinds of raids, but why not do two for one? That
Not
seems
be
like a
prepared.
logical
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, get two for
Uh,
one.
so, what other actions can we take to protect our our bodies, our chosen families?
Yeah. I think all of this is going on in the ecosystem. Um, Obviously figuring out and maintaining self-care. And for me, and I know a lot of people, especially many of us who are very service-minded, self-care looks like taking care of others in so many ways.
Mhm.
So exercise that. I think that if there's any big takeaway, the big takeaway is do not spend too much time sitting in a ball rocking by yourself like in that ball. Don't do like yes, don't doom scroll. Be out amongst people who you love. And in particular, think about how you can be an ally and generous to those of us who are more vulnerable in one way or another. Because wherever you are, whoever you are, you probably have more privilege than one other person. And to be able to show up in that way is again how we dance and how we dance so that we can fight. And it looks so different. I have a friend who I have this wonderful friend who was in a lot of despair, and the way that they responded to this despair, this delightful trans person did like a queer, trans centered craft night at her house. That is the way she is showing up. And that is huge. And I cannot stress how important that is. I'm not suggesting we all go do like protest and wear our fetish wear and like go storm the state capitol. Host a craft night and invite some people to your house to commiserate, to share food, to make those little puffball things, like the little puffball, like little things with eyes. Do that.
Aw, the little pom-pom things.
Little pom pom things.
I've got a couple of questions here. I think
Okay.
would love to go into this. Somebody wrote, I've seen a lot of places make memberships and act as membership clubs to avoid certain regional legality issues. Is this a norm? Can you comment on that?
It is absolutely a norm. And again, the reason why some of those things exist is because you cannot actually have these spaces be public spaces. So the way they manage them is by having private membership clubs, which, they different rules might operate for them in the context of one zoning, right? But also just in the ability to operate, because, I think there is a community standard in some communities that what we do is harmful, right? And harmful to society. And so should not be open to the public. So it is very much a local condition.
And it varies wildly by locality, like county by county, right?
Yeah, there are some states that are worse than others. Chicago, Illinois is different from Chicago, but Chicago, for example, is actually a lot better in many respects. There's a lot more ability to actually operate a legitimate business. But it's also like you have to know your alderman. Like it's like each particular space has a very different sort of set of expectations. I think Pennsylvania is one of the hardest ones in which to operate like um, a publicly accessible sex club. Um, or kink space, right? So I think those are Massachusetts, I think is one that is also really tricky. So you see a lot of the many of those things are private parties. Ironically, Las Vegas is one of the hardest places to actually operate a kink space. Yeah.
Counterintuitive.
The city of sin, the city of sin. Like,
Well, it seems counterintuitive, yet it is a city that counts on internalized sexual negativity and shame to make money.
and also a strong casino lobbying
Right.
infrastructure.
Yeah. Um, okay, so I think this relates, there's a question that's relating to venue protection.
Mhm.
And somebody asked, is there protection as a subletter for sublet for event venues? I think that means like, I'm guessing that that means like if I were to rent East Bay Community Space, or if I were to rent the Folsom Street Fair office.
Mhm.
I think that's what they mean.
So it's probably worth being really clear with you all that I can't give any of you legal advice. Like, I'm not your lawyer. And first and foremost, and second, like the venue specific laws vary widely depending on specific facts and the location. So I want to give those caveats. So many of these things are generalities, which should prompt you to sort of ask more questions. And if you want to operate a venue, or um, I would strongly advise talking to a lawyer in that city, right, who would actually know land use, because land use is probably the most important aspect for a physical space and running a business like this. Um, so, and local license law. um, so, uh, in terms of sublet, I don't think sublet gets you around anything. In fact, it just puts like another layer of somebody who gets to sort of approve or disapprove of what you're doing. So, one a very common challenge that I see is kink businesses having a hard time finding a landlord that will rent to them. So, you see this. Um, there's a very limited number of spaces where you can actually rent. Like in our town, for example, it is incredibly difficult. Like it's like round peg, square hole trying to find a space that is accessible and has hard points. And all of these things, like the laundry list is so long in order to find a rentable space. So, we that's a real problem that we have in this town. And this is a town where we have a lot more runway than most towns. So if you are not seeing all the spaces that you want, it is that it tracks.
I'm taking a look at some of the other questions here.
Mhm.
Let's see. Okay, I'm not sure I understand this, but I'm going to read it and see you might understand better.
Right.
Uh, Someone asked, my city has a local longtime dungeon,
Okay.
and thus is rather well known.
Mhm.
In the current day scheme, not just in overall politics, but in awareness of bad actors, are there any red flag risks to being a member of a space based on their response to individuals and laws, generally speaking, of course?
I am trying really hard to not be in a space of hyperbolic fear,
Hmm.
of being too afraid. Um, I think there's less, this is personal opinion, not legal advice. I think there's less risk than of a kink club that is well established and has a reasonable reputation in terms of like who's running it, of disclosing your private information than social media. All of the all of the X's. I have as a personal and practical matter, have assumed that everything that I post on social media is no longer mine and is accessible to the entire world and no longer belongs to me as a practical matter.
And true that by that little box that we click on any platform.
Yeah.
So,
So
yeah.
I think that is, I think what we do on social media is a much bigger risk to our own privacy and safety than anything that we might do with a organization that is concerned about our civil liberties. They may not always have the practical ability to protect your identity if they are subpoenaed or whatnot, but uh, they probably won't hand it over. They probably won't hand it over as readily as many of our social media conglomerates would.
Um, and I think this relates, this next question, advice around character assassinations, especially as a party host.
It's tricky, right? That's a really great question. I think let me first start by saying I think that because of the nature of what we do and in kink and in sex positive spaces, we have a tendency to draw people who would prey on others. Like they can hide here easier than, say, in the rest of the world. Um, and also, I think as a community, we are also, I'm probably a bit biased because I'm deep in it, but we are probably pretty fucking traumatized right now. And many of us come to this world very hurt. And I know that hurt people, right? So I think in terms of that, uh, I personally would just love if we could have more one-on-one conversations and engage with accountability circles and engage with each other rather than screaming into the void of social media. Like that is just because I think you're more likely to actually get action. You're more likely to get change if people have good intentions, if you actually go through the channels that one might be able to hear and receive. So that is not responsive to the how do you deal with character assassination, which I assume is the nature of the question. Is like if your character is being assassinated as a event or party host, like how do you deal with that? Um, I don't know. Like to be honest, I think the best one can do is stand in their own integrity. And if there's with an invitation for accountability, if there is people that are saying things, there's a whole body of law around defamation and slander. And we go into that at length in the BDSM and the law class.
And you're going to be doing a BDSM in the law class sometime. You do this regularly through different hosts. What's one that's coming up?
There's one at Kink Fest uh, in April. I just did one maybe a few weeks ago with the Forbidden Tickets Blackthorn. And if you host me, Midori, I'll do another one.
Okay.
We're doing love loss and legalese in May, but like this is a topic I'm happy to talk about
Oh,
anytime.
oh, oh. Oh, since you mentioned that, y'all, MxBliss is coming up in my Patreon to do a presentation called Love, Loss, and Legalese. A little bit about what that is? Just a little,
Yeah.
what is that?
It's about all of it's trying to it's largely it's a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call for all of us who haven't taken care of the people who we love yet when the inevitable happens, right? It's just about doing things like giving clear written legally enforceable instruction about what happens to our bodies when we are in a vegetative state. It's about making sure that if we are trans people, that our gender is honored in our healthcare. It is about making sure that the partner that I've been living with, just because they're not my marital partner, doesn't get kicked out of the house that we've shared for the last 10 years. It's like those things. I know when you think of estate planning, you think of rich people trying to dodge taxes, and by far and away, that is what people think estate planning is. I think of estate planning is just not fucking over the people who you love when shit happens, which it will. So yeah, it's I like talk about joking in the class, and I do like I try really hard to be joking in the class and to make it fun and light. But really, there's I have like a sense of urgency about that message, and in part because I see it like in my practice. I see people scrambling and then dealing with the consequences of not having taken care of their shit. Right. So that's the
So that's May 1st, y'all.
yeah.
So and that's for my active subscribers to Patreon. So come check it out. I want to go back because I did have a note to myself that there was a bit about that rumors and defamation. What else around defamation, privacy law, and that ugly area of social media?
Yeah. Um, I think there's a lot of research that social media is pretty toxic, like bad for our mental health as a general matter of fact. Um, it invites us to scream out into the void, right? And sometimes we think that it is without consequence, or we sometimes act like it is without consequence. There's a whole body of law around defamation that says that if you are saying things that are untruthful and that you can be held civilly and or criminally liable for those untruths. And those things include things like outing people and doxing people. There's other like areas of that conversation that talk about ruining somebody's reputation. Um, I will say that as a general principle, I am not a fan of using the law to silence accountability, right? Like I'm a big fan of airing that conversation and having that conversation. Um, but it is, there is a body of law that is designed to help people protect their reputations and the truth from uh, from lies. And when you make statements on the internet, when you spread a rumor, when you talk to a friend, those are acts of publication, right? That are subject to the defamation laws. Again, I think there's two sides to that coin, which is that there is a long history within our community of people with power and money using defamation laws to silence them. I think there is, a situation that was well known in the Bay Area in the last couple of years where um, somebody who had allegedly harmed a number of people uh, used the law to silence accusers, right? To silence people who had claimed he had sexually abused them, and that is very sad because it's very sad, right? It's like that lack of accountability, right?
Yeah, weaponizing that which is meant to,
Protect people.
yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
And here's the practical reality of this, at least in those circumstances. And this also happened in Canada. Right? Canada has similar but different laws, um, where essentially somebody with resources hired lawyers and went, like if the person who's complaining does not have resources, right? Like um, they will get buried in legal costs in order
Right.
to just defend, in order to just hold a statement of accusation. They will get railroaded and have to hire an attorney in order to defend themselves.
Mm.
Have a day in court. And like that is ultimately like one of um the things that uh that really hurts my brain about the US legal system. In the criminal sphere, we have the right to a public defender if you're being prosecuted for certain kinds of crimes. In the civil area, we don't have that right. So, like you find that in many ways justice can be bought, right? And and we saw that happen in Canada. I saw that happen in the Bay Area. And this is not a statement about who was right or who was wrong. It's just a statement about the process. Right.
There's a comment in the chat about John Oliver having done a great segment on that, and it capped it off with a giant musical number in Times Square. Yay, John Oliver.
Yes. It's when comedians are the truth sayers of our society, not
Well, jesters have always been. Um, so we're talking about money now,
Mhm.
which gets me to segue to the question of financial liability for kink-related injury.
Yeah. It is really unclear. It is
Hmm.
really unclear who is responsible for these sorts of things. I think what we don't do very often in our very complicated multi-page negotiation spreadsheets is actually talk about what happens when something goes wrong. And you and I, Midori, we do a lot of rope. And in particular, rope suspension is one where there are lots of injuries, right? Like people get injured when they play in rope. Impact, you're like, you're beating the shit out of somebody. Like,
Hmm.
hello, sometimes people get hurt. Um, and so the question that I think I'm urging people to ask each other as they're getting out and pulling out all their toys and their rope is if something goes wrong, how do we take care of that and make sure that it's a negotiated conversation? When I'm playing with new people who are for one reason or another, whether it is through my rope practice, my rope business, or whether it is just like somebody new that I'm playing with, I always ask the question, do you have health insurance? Because I do not have the ability to pay if you have an injury. Yeah, it's like, how do you want to feel in this scene? And do you have health insurance?
Woof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like if you don't have health insurance, let's spend the next 2 hours applying for health insurance under the Affordable Health Care Act or applying for Medicaid because I think that's a much better use of our time than fucking around with rope.
Yeah. Wow. And so not sexy, and yet.
Incredibly sexy. Personal responsibility is incredibly sexy. And when I say personal responsibility, I mean that on both sides
Yeah,
of
yeah.
both sides of that conversation, right?
Actually, come to think of it, I'm having an aside thought. Visualize my mental post-it note. In fact, I might post-it note it. I might need to have you come and talk to the Fort FM Alumni Society.
I would love to. Yeah.
Okay. Um, what else about
Does that mean I get to come to the dinner?
um yeah.
Not that's just one of the highlights of Forte Femme. For those of you who have not been to Forte Femme, by the way, I can't speak highly enough about it. It's just it was so memorable. My partner who was the partner who came to be my demo partner and I talk about it all the time. It was one of the most lovely experiences.
Aw. Um,
I
what
should I should have my mug, which is at my church, but I should have my mug, which I do not.
what else about maybe not just financial liability,
Mhm.
but financial responsibility, which is a very different thing than liability,
100%. Yeah.
in terms of kink-related injuries.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I think it is a negotiated conversation, but in the instance, say, of having a house where you have a hard point and you invite your friends or your partners to come and play, like also hard points fail. People trip and fall on their way to dungeon parties. Like all of those things are uh, part of the risk analysis that I would encourage people to think about. Um, in the chat, I think Mr. Greg will put in the little handout, and it's a BDSM in the law risk assessment handout. It'll ask you a bunch of questions that I just want you to think about, right? And many of those, some of them deal with criminal law, some of them deal with privacy. A good handful of them deal with financial risk and how and where you want to bear that financial risk. Because if you have homeowners insurance or renters insurance, if your hard point fails, I guarantee you your homeowner's insurance is going to say that that's a non-covered injury, right? So just knowing that
Yeah.
those things are out there should be part of the
Uh, for, for those of you who are here live, look at the chat box, and you will see the PDF posted in there. And for those of you who are watching this later on, please look in if you're looking at this in YouTube, the actual document might live in my Patreon because of YouTube attaching things, blah, blah, blah. But there might be a link there. But there will be resources. Now somebody writes, I appreciate kink persons who know what they will do if something goes wrong and they discuss it in negotiations. Yes, great. Asterisk, in theory, because a lot of things could go wrong. And to what detail can we discuss this? And when the oh shit happens outside of what we discussed.
yeah.
Oh, and somebody writes, can there be a hard point insurance that I mean, I know you're joking to the person who mentioned that, but that might be an insurance business.
I can actually talk to you about that because some of I had the intention of opening a rope studio, which I'm not doing, in part because of insurance. Uh, in small part. Insurance is incredibly difficult to obtain for rope bondage. Let me just let's start there. Uh, you can get insurance as an aerial arts studio, which is the kind of insurance that I have. Um, but you cannot get insurance like this rope bondage studio. I heard a story about somebody who was trying to get insurance for a rope bondage studio, and what the insurance carrier, and it was like a third or fourth tier carrier. So like when I say third or fourth tier, I mean like there's a bunch of insurance agents or insurance companies that are like Prudential or like State Farm who do like insurance for businesses, like vanilla businesses, like coffee shops. And then there's higher risk carriers who charge 3 or 4x what you would pay for other kinds of insurance. And those specialty kinds of insurance companies, not only do they charge multiples of what, say, an aerial art studio would charge, and also aerial art studios are also a specialty, like they're maybe second or third tier. So you get to these like lower tier, higher risk carriers, and they will require you to have like 1 foot crash pads and 24 like anytime there's people in the studio, like video surveillance. I don't
Mhm.
I don't think anybody wants to be surveilled while I'm tying them up and doing terrible things to them in rope, right? So
Yeah.
the requirements are pretty onerous. It can be obtained. It is exceedingly expensive, and there are very few carriers who will operate in that space.
And see, this goes back to why it's difficult to have events
Yes.
and the the logistical and business expense of running a venue or an event. And okay, so I gotta say, I get cranky when people are inconsiderate about what venue owners, managers, hosts are going through to make events happen. I understand that, some things, more accessibility would be nice,
Yeah.
but more accessibility is difficult when there are so many layers of challenges.
And even for, so I don't operate a public space, but even when I have private parties, I ask people to sign a release of liability. You are playing at your own risk.
Mm-hmm.
You like you you make sure that hard point is exactly what you want it to be before you put somebody up on it. If somebody slips and falls on my front step, like, sorry, you're here at your own risk.
Yeah. Yep.
But,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, and the people who host spaces, I mean, I all power to them because whew, that's a lot.
Which, going back to the what can you do as a non-kink business is to like show those people support. It's, like I don't know anybody who's in kink business and is like who's living high on the hog, right? Because they're making so much in kink. It's just not a reality. I don't need to tell you, Midori,
I
but
I
I
do I do want to clarify though because um I joke, I don't joke that my ability to accessorize, I think it's mistaken with my revenue level.
that's a what are you deducting conversation?
Yeah, it or yeah, the yeah, getting people who are like, "Oh, you write books, you must be raking in the royalties on that." I'm like, "No. On my book, Seductive Art of Japanese Bondage, y'all, I make $1 a book, and that's good." Yeah. Ay, 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 ay.
Yeah,
So
it is exceedingly hard to make a living in kink. So
yeah.
to the extent that you have capacity to do things like be a
Mhm.
Patreon supporter, for example.
Or volunteering and helping out with local spaces.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Supporting whether it's like if like if you have dungeon monitors and dungeon monitor training in your town. And if you don't, like, there's some of that that's available online, but learn how to be a dungeon monitor like that. You can help keep events safer. Like all of these things are ways in which we can support the community and dance.
Yep. And sometimes the support that you can offer, if you're friendly with the event host or venue owner, is to check in with them if they're doing okay and what they need. Because, oh, I know plenty of people who, yours truly included, not good at asking for help.
Mm.
Yeah.
If you have both volunteer energy and or resources,
Hmm.
I've started to fundraise in order to support legal clinics, like free legal clinics. So those are, I think, Mr. Greg just posted them. If you go to the link tree, I think the first button is a new campaign that I've started.
Nice.
I'm donating all of my like bondage performance related proceeds towards funding legal clinics for sex workers and trans folks locally. And then another series of just sort of more informal chats for trans folks across the country who aren't in Portland or San Francisco, where we have a disproportionate number of resources.
Thank you. Um, for those of you who've been to previous Consent Dojos know, I ask all our guests for homework. Now, there's a big homework that I believe is a worksheet, but then there's a small homework. Tell us about the worksheet homework.
So the worksheet homework is unfortunately a very long. We get paid by the word, lawyers. We get paid by the word, is what I'm told. No. I have my amazing, beautiful submissive has done a really great job of taking what was a very long document and making it shorter, and not just by shrinking the font. But she has done a really lovely job of condensing it. And it's just a risk analysis. It's just like, here's a checklist of things that you may not have been thinking about that maybe you might as you are living and dancing. And dancing in a risk measured way. And as an older person, I need to dance all the time in a risk measured way. So just, like I don't want you to be caught by surprise, I think is the point of that homework. And if anything there is, strikes your curiosity and you want to learn more about, ping Midori, ping me. I think you will all have access to my email address. And as between like Midori and I think we're thinking about figuring out ways to like address some of these questions and make the answers publicly available or are available at least to Patreon, right? And then second, and this is a more important piece of homework and one that you know when Midori and I first talked about this consent dojo, like I go through waves of despair, like moments where like I'm in the fetal position. And I was like, we need to talk about hope. Like, we need to talk about and um I've been puzzling since we talked about this session about what that looks like. And, we talked a little bit about this, like, how do you show up when we are a service-oriented community? How do you show up for people who are less privileged than you or who are more vulnerable than you? Or if you are in a vulnerable class, how you show up for others like yourself, right? And community is so huge. And community can look like calling your event host or like your event host on their FetLife profile and saying, thank you for doing this. Thank you for putting this on. I like all of these. I don't know anybody who's not doing this as a labor of love and as a commitment to dance. So giving them that kind of support, maybe giving them the benefit of the doubt. If you have a question and you don't like a practice, and maybe like reaching out to them personally instead of screaming it out into the void of social media. Um, but maybe it looks like hosting a queer-friendly craft evening or, however that looks like. Find whatever it is that brings you joy and share that joy and figure out how to dance so that we can fight. I think that's the homework, and just do one thing. And and it turns out for me anyways, the way I manage my anxiety and despair is to act and think about ways to act. And frankly, it's the only way that I sort of get motivated out of that fetal position is to go and commit to do things, right? And show up. When you show up for other people, you show up for yourself.
The thing I love doing that gives me joy and hope is connecting people.
Yes, so much.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, like because I've got some folks that I totally want to introduce you to, and yeah, I feel like it's making like the when I say web, I don't mean the internet, the interweb. I mean the connectedness of people stronger by introducing people who are doing good. And if we can introduce more people who are doing good, some of us occasionally might get a moment of rest and good company. I've started going to uh, movies with some of my colleagues just to, and not necessarily kink movies, just let's go to a movie. Let's eat bad popcorn and go to a movie. Yeah.
Yes. I was talking to my meta today and I'm like, let's go do some vanilla shit. That's pretty radical. Let's let's go do some vanilla shit. Yeah.
So, I want to bring the recording to a close, but also stick around and have conversation with the folks who are here live. So, stick around. And for those of you who are viewing this in recording, thank you for watching us. And thank you for those of you who are supporting my Patreon. And if you're not supporting my Patreon, come on over because I have a lot of cool things in there. So it's patreon.com/Planet Midori.
I've been a supporter for years and get so much out of it. So please do the
I
same.
put a lot in there. So go out there, y'all, create some joy because with every action, we are building our consent muscle because it takes practice. Oh my God.